Deep breath, right? How's it going, folks? This is Algernon Alexander, man. I'm just reaching out to you all. Let me warn you in advance. This video is not going to be perfect, but one thing that I did not want to do is wait to craft a perfect message with the perfect questions, especially during this time. Obviously, we know what's going on. We see a lot of protests. We see a lot of response to the historical violence that's been perpetuated against people of color, women of color, men of color, not only as of recent, but for centuries, from Tamir Rice to Freddie Gray to George Floyd, to all the way back to Emmett Till. To Martin Luther King. We can just go on and on and on about that, and I'm proud of our response to it at this time, right? But we've never been a stranger to responding to these situations. But I love the energy of what we're doing. Because I'm a coach, because I'm an NLP trainer, I have comrades all across the planet, and people have been giving me calls just to get my thoughts about it. Also to reconcile some things that they've been thinking about. I've had calls from sisters from Austria, brothers and sisters from Ireland. I was talking to one of my Jewish brothers the other day for a couple hours, but I've been getting a lot of calls about, just from people who consider themselves to be allies. What can they do? And one thing that I've said, and I say this unapologetically, I appreciate allies. I appreciate those from outside of our community stepping up, educating their communities about the atrocities that have been happening forever. But one thing that I told them was this: I don't want our community to have to rely on their moral change or the moral change of the society in general before we get our just due, before we get the changes that we absolutely deserve. The biggest thing that I think needs to happen is we need to understand our value and be able to leverage that value. When you look at things from a historical perspective, let's just say, for example, we use the bus boycott, right? The bus boycott that was led by Martin Luther King, as well as a bunch of other people, but Martin Luther King was the figurehead for that particular boycott. It lasted 300 and something days, right? For years, that particular community had been asking for justice, not to be able to sit on the back of the bus, to be treated with a basic humanity that was lacking at that time, and that society didn't change, and that moral change didn't happen. It didn't happen until that community understood their value and said, we are going to remove our finances. We're not going to be on the bus. And they weren't on the bus for 380 something days, I believe. And at that point, even though that system, that white supremacist system, I don't believe they changed their ideology and say, you know what, we really think these people are great. I think they understood their value economically, and they had to change. So because that community understood its value and understood what it was bringing to the table, it leveraged that value to command change. Not just demand, did not ask for it, not beg for it. It said, this is our value financially, and until you do these things, we're going to create the terms. These are the terms that we want. You don't meet them, we don't support. And I believe that once we really understand our value and leverage that value, we will absolutely get the change we want on a legislative level. And systematic racism will have to change because we will understand our value and we will leverage that value. I was watching a movie, I think it's called Be Like Water by Bruce Lee. And in that documentary, it talked about how Bruce Lee came from China and he brought his skills to the United States, right? And when he was in those movies that he would get casted in, they would typically use him for his technical expertise, his ability to, perform karate at a high level, right? So he would wait to be casted in those movies, but they never really showed the underlying philosophy that fed and that fueled his technical expertise. They would have him as just being Cato, not being a brilliant philosopher. And what he realized was that he was never going to get the credit that he deserved, until he went back to Hong Kong and started to create his own movies. And when he created his own movies, he not only showed his technical expertise, right? he also always made sure that he infused the Asian philosophy. See, when he was in the United States, all those movie producers, they would come to his home. They would soak up his knowledge. They would soak up the wisdom of Eastern philosophy or Asian philosophy. They would soak it up and they would use it in their business practices, but they would never show the world that where they were getting it from, right? Because that was how would I say, that would be against the idea of white supremacy. So he had to go back home, create his own movies, and use that technical expertise while showing the Asian philosophy in it. And those movies were so successful that at that point, the movie producers here was like, we need in on that. So by him going home, understanding his own value, he was able to leverage that for the change that he was looking for. He understood his value. So I would love to see us understand our own value, leverage that value, and command change. I feel like we had that spirit in the late 80s, early 90s when it came to the music. We were ill when it came to rapping and everything else, but we also made sure that we infused the music with our political ideology. You know what I'm saying? With our spiritual ideology, with our pro-blackness or our African standard, our Pan-Africanism. We included that in our art. And I think when we did that, it was respected on a different space. And unfortunately, it got co-opted. So, I know this was a long video, but I didn't want it to have to be perfect. These are my thoughts, man. Comment below. Let me know what you think. I would love for us to get to the point we don't have to ask or beg for any changes. We command it. We know our value. And if we're not getting what we want, we withdraw the value that we're providing. And I guarantee you this system cannot survive without the value that we as a community brings to it. All right? Let me know what you think. Peace.